Well, Possum Holler was George Jones' nightclub there on Printer's Alley. And I just put out the album on Lone Star Records, Willie Nelson's label. Willie had called me up and said, "Hey man, I've got a record label. I need to put out an album. You got anything?" I said, "Well, I got a bunch of demos." And Tyler, he said, "Well, can we do it?" So I grabbed everything that went to the studio that weekend, did put everything together, put it out on Lone Star Records. So we did this tour. We did 38 cities in 42 days. We started off in Fargo, North Dakota in January. And then we went up through Green Bay. And, a lot of these places, they just put a tarp on a ice hockey rink with chairs, and we played. And so one of the gigs after it was on the way back is they got us Printer's Alley in Nashville to promote, the record. So we go there and we play our set, and it's just a funky little nightclub. And I don't know, we had maybe 50, 60 people. So we walk in the dressing room, and there's Hank Williams Jr. and George Jones and Jerry Lee Lewis sitting there. And they're drinking, and George is going, "Jerry, call Tammy and tell her to take that peace bond off of me." It was just, maybe I imagined that, but I swear that's what, So anyhow, they're going, "Well, let's go play." And we'll back this guy, we'll get up with this guy's band. So we go on stage. By that time, there's about 13, 14 people left. And so we walk on stage with Hank Jr., Jerry Lee Lewis, and George Jones. And so everybody, whoa, so they all come running up to the stage. All of a sudden, Jerry Lee goes over to the piano and hits a few things. He goes, "Hell, I don't want to do this." Gets up and walks off. So George and Hank Jr. walk off too. So yeah, that was our Printer's Alley gig. Yeah, man. Almost, yeah.
Were you ever around Jerry Lee any other time?
Oh, a couple of Willie's Picnic, like 48 Hours at Atoka, where he and David Allen were comparing guns by shooting them into the night, but not really. And then one time, I think it was at Whiskey River, and I was going to go over to meet him, but he had these guys that looked like wrestlers around him, and I didn't go over or say anything. Yeah. I never was into piano, but I could definitely dig the vibe of him rocking, that whole rock and roll thing with he and Little Richard and those guys, man. I could appreciate that, even though I didn't play keyboards.
Yeah. Were you ever around George Jones any other time?
Yeah, I've been. Judah is a big George Jones fan, so we went to see him up in Billy Bob's, Texas. And so we get backstage, and Judy and I are there, and all of a sudden George comes in, and I go, "Here you go." She goes, "No," and I go, "Well, just go meet." No, she just couldn't bring herself to meet him. And that's when his whole set that night, he kept saying, "We're going to play all night long. We love you. We love you." And I said, "He's going to play 70 minutes. I mean, 70. He won't play 71. He'll play 70 minutes. And that whole night he was hawking George Jones dog food. You remember that?
No.
Yeah, big old sacks of George Jones dog food. You got dogs. You need George Jones dog food. And after every song, because he had just signed a deal with his dog food company. So it was kind of he played 70 minutes, But yeah, you can probably Google George Jones dog food, and I think it's went out of business, but he was balking the soup out of it that night, I never had done Austin City Limits, and some people were writing Terry Lacona trying to get me on and everything. And then Hayes did it, and he wanted me to come up and do Drunken Poet's Dream with him, and actually Hayes made an announcement that this is Ray Wylie's first ever appearance on Austin City Limits, and I think even there was a gasp from the camera crew that they hadn't done it. So we never did do it. So then finally Terry said yeah, and then COVID hit. So he said, "You can do it, but we don't have an audience." And I said, "But I'll give you the whole hour." So we didn't have to split with anybody. So I called up Gurf, and I said, Gurf Morlix, and I said, hey, man, you want to play bass with me on the Austin City Limits? Because he was really instrumental in making great records for me. And so he said, yeah. And I said, but you got to wear Don Walser's hat. You know, when Don Walser was passing away, he gave Gurf his hat. Said, if you wear Don Walser's hat, you can play bass. He said, okay. So we went down there, and everybody had to get checked, you know, the temperature and all that stuff. And there was nobody there, you know. But we went through, did the whole show. And then after we finished, I think one of the cameramen came up and said, you're one of the very few people that did your show that didn't have to do a repeat of one of the songs, do it a do-over of one of the songs. And I said, well, nobody told me we could do that. You know? And he said, oh, yeah. I said, we've had other people stop and redo it. No, well, we didn't. We just went all the way through. And it was cool. Like I say, there was no audience there. I think they dubbed in applause. And I don't know if I was the only one who ever did one without an audience or not. I don't know. I haven't paid attention. And then had a good thing with Terry Lacona, and he was very gracious and said, you know, he took over after they had done 4 years, and for some reason he thought I'd done something in the first 4 years, and so that's why they never had me on there. But, you know,
Was it something that you'd always wanted to do?
it wasn't on my goal list to do it. You know,
Was it something the fans wanted more than you, maybe?
I think so. Yeah. You know. Yeah. Well, now I'll never do it again. If Terry sees this. No, but I mean, it would have been cool to have been on it, you know, of course, but it wasn't something that I lost sleep over because I wasn't, you know. I mean, earlier on, I probably, you know, would have really, you know, been screwed it up, you know, drinking or whatever. You know, I got clean and sober when I was 41, and, you know, I've had really great stuff to happen to me as I've gotten older, you know. I think I did Fallon at 64 and Letterman at 66. And
what do you remember about the Letterman appearance?
well, we had to get permission from the school and the Musicians Union and Child Protective Services from New York because Lucas was like 17, you know, so we had to kind of go through some hoops to get him to do it, and he, you know, had to get out of school, and we flew up there. We went up there and had Kyle and Rick Richards and George Reef. They were my band at the time, but then Joe Walsh called me up and said, I don't want to steal your band, but I want to steal your Snake Farm band, because he had, you know, played Grit and Groove, and I put a band together for him. And so I couldn't stand in George's or Rick's way to play with Joe Walsh, because Rick had been in a James Gang cover band when he was a teenager, so it was a big deal. So they went out, so I had Kyle and John Michael and Lucas, and we went up there and played Letterman. It was Fashion Week in New York, so people knew we weren't there for that. You know, just, but it was, you know, it was cold, you know, and that's why I wore that weird hat, because it would just he keeps that studio like at 56 degrees or something, and they said because he doesn't want to ever see anybody sweat or anything, you know, like Nixon did during the debates back then, you know, and so he keeps it really cold. And we went up there and did the sound check, and then did the check where they do the camera angles, and then didn't meet him until the show, you know, when I've done the other. I think the other guest was James Brolin and some other actress, I can't remember. And so we get there and they run everything out, and then all of a sudden Letterman comes over. He goes, thank you for being here. And I said, well, thank you for having me. He goes, you know Guy Clark? I go, yeah, I know Guy Clark. And he said, I like him. I said, I like him too. In fact, I just talked to Guy recently, and Guy told me that, hey, Ray, we're getting at that age we can hide our own Easter eggs, you know, which was what Guy had told me that. So we go over, so anyhow, let him right before we go on the bear. I said, okay, people, listen up. I really like this guy here, and he was talking to Guy Clark, and Guy Clark said he and Ray that they had their own Easter eggs. He did this joke that I just told him that Guy had told me, and then so then we did the show, and it was cool. We did the Mother Blues because that's what he wanted to do. We had to shorten it and we sped it up because we had like 3 minutes and 40 seconds to do it, and I think the real song is like 5 minutes. So we had to make sure we know what we were doing. So we finish, and he goes, "Thank you, good night," and and everybody down, and then they stopped, and all of a sudden Letterman goes, "Wait a minute, stay a minute." He said, "Would you do Screw You, We're from Texas?" And I went, "Really?" And I said, "Aren't you from Connecticut?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I just like people when they say screw you." So he said, "Well, if you'll..." So anyhow, so we're at that point, and I said, "Yeah." So Lucas is over there, and he says, "I think I want to play this in open E." And I looked, I said, "Have you ever played an open E?" He goes, "No." So he starts tuning to open E, and oh, he's there. So I said, "Hey, this is a song. It's meant to be taken ironically, and so we did Screw You. We're from Texas to the audience there, and they loved it and everything. And then Paul Schaefer came over and said he very rarely asks people to do that second song, So he said, so that was cool,
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was pretty neat.
I love Letterman. Letterman's from my old neighborhood in Indianapolis.
Yeah, man. He had Tom Russell on, and and Willie and Billy Joe, and God, Elizabeth Cook, just people you'd think that aren't mainstream. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it was. He just said he was driving around and he heard Mother Blues on Outlaw Country, and and it just. Got him, Well, first off, we had to get together and rehearse to get it in the time limit. So you got to rent a rehearsal space in Austin, and we had to figure that out. And then we got to fly, you got, let's see, 6 flights, because Judy was going to go, and then the hotel rooms, and then picked up a car from the hotel, but before they had to have a cab, and then you got to feed everybody. And then you got to come back, So it was expensive to do it, But it's
a huge audience.
Yeah, it really was, and it was really nice of him to do that. And Lucas, like I say, got paid, and then I think residuals or whatever, But it was fun to do it, and it was really cool because I had Matson Rayner of KNBT and Josh Jones of Y95 in Dallas, and Jeremy from Outlaw Country, the 3 most influential outlaw country radio station programs director, were there together, and they were my guests, which was where they all wanted to come do that. So that was cool to have those guys of that stature in radio say, "Hey man, can we come?" I said, "Yeah, come on,"
Yeah.
So that was very that's nice.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who watch this that might be having problems with drinking or whatever, thinking they might want to go be in a better place in life or whatever. Could you talk a little bit about like your path? I remember you said something about Stevie Ray Vaughan was part of the early.
Well, it's I've you're given so many drink coupons when you're coming to the world, and I used all mine up, and then I kept and so it was I was at a point I didn't even know what was going on. It's like I wanted to quit drinking, but I couldn't. It was just one of those weird things. Like, man, I need to quit this. This is getting bad, and then I'd do it again. And Stevie met with me with his sponsor BC. I talked to them. And it was just one of those things, as he got me in recovery, and I didn't even know what Alcoholics Anonymous was or NA or any of that stuff. I thought AA, you'd walk in and be a bunch of these old guys sitting around going, "Well, I can't drink." And I go, "Well, I can't drink either." "Well, God damn it, we can't drink," and I thought that's what it was, and but he there in Dallas, I started going into these recovery, And I found out, sobriety is more than just the absence of intoxication. Sobriety is, it was just an amazing thing. And so I got into it and worked those 12 steps, like they said, and had a spiritual awakening, which, it's not a religious conversion, and because religion had alienated me to anything spiritual, divine, or holy. When I was a kid growing up in southeast Oklahoma, my grandmothers would take to these churches and they were whooping and hollering. God was scary. God was really scary. So, when we moved to Dallas, somewhere around 13, 14, I didn't have to go to church, and I heard the word agnostic. And I went, what's an agnostic? And they said, that's someone who doesn't know if there's a God. And I went, then I shall be an agnostic, because it sounded cool. And so, I got it, came into the rooms, as they say, and actually, there was the word God up there, and I went, oh man, not God, nah, anything but that. But it came to the point that to continue the way I was going to have nothing but devastating moments for the rest of my life. I mean, I knew that because I had so many, moments. And so I said, well, so I came in and became teachable. Before I was unteachable, man. You couldn't teach me anything. But I came in, and all of a sudden these people, they weren't just sitting around bitching about not drinking. They were grateful that they weren't, because all of a sudden their lives had turned around, and that gave me, because I came in without any faith or belief or hope. But I got a little bit of hope that, well, maybe I don't have to continue to, waking up going, where am I? Who are you? And so anyhow, so I came in and did the deal and worked the 12 steps, and had as I say, a psychic change, where that spiritual awakening, where I woke up to spirituality, and I found out there's a difference between spirituality and spiritual awakening than religious conversion. And I say I don't go to church, I don't read the Bible, I don't watch religious shows on TV. I still cuss, and and so, and all of a sudden, so that was on my 41st birthday. I got those. I was 40 years old and then I turned 41, hadn't had a drink since, or a drug since. So anyhow, if anybody's out there's got it's like I had this preconceived idea of what it was going to be like. I just thought I'd just sit around and mope, And I remember I'd go to these meetings and I'd hear these guys, something like say, it's the first drink that gets you drunk. And I go, no, it's about the eighth one. What are these guys drinking? And they go, no, if you don't take that first one, you won't trigger any physical allergy phenomena of craving that second one. So it finally made sense. That is, so when I first came in, it was don't drink one day at a time. Just this 24-hour period, don't drink. Yeah, okay. And today, it's not about drinking at all, man. I know I'm not going to drink today, but today's about treating this day with the respect that it deserves, to honor it and to do things today to see what I can contribute, with these old songs, whether it's make somebody laugh or smile or groove or think, And so it's been, what, 30s? When it was 87, what is that, 36 years, I guess? Yeah. And like I say, it's I'm very, very grateful, because I got a pretty incredible life today. And, and the only thing I gave up was 1 ounce of alcohol. So I don't take that first one, I'm going to take the second one. So I'm doing, and I'm very, very grateful that Stevie took the time and that I got into an old funky group there in Dallas called Phoenix, which is just a bunch of badass drug people. I used to know a guy there when I first came in. The guy's named Duke. He had this card. It said Duke, FTDD. I go, what does that stand for? He goes, full-time drug dealer. I'm not one of these college kids that just does it for the heck of it. And I said, well, you got a phone number there? And he goes, it's backwards. I mean, it's pretty smart thinking, but full-time drug dealer. So anyhow, but I got there, and I really like those cats, the people. They really, I became very, very, I still try to honor what I learned, because I was pretty much in the dark, until some of the people, gave me a flashlight to get out of it. I'd probably be dead or in jail, like somebody asked me to say, 66 years old, wasn't that a little late to be making your first appearance on David Letterman? And I go, I didn't want to peak too soon, man. I mean, they're still going. Austin City Limits at 74. How weird's that, And, I got a track with a beetle, an eagle, a crow, and a was not was. I mean, anybody else done that? No, just it's very, very, very fortunate, very, very grateful. Right there at the end, when I was still drinking, the only gig I could get was Charlie's Airport Lounge on Mockingbird Lane in Dallas, and I was alternating sets with a lingerie show. And this was a bar that opened 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was there, and I was playing there, and, I'd walk on stage, and they'd go, play Redneck Mother, and I'd go, oh, I play Redneck Mother, and I'd go, here's another song I wrote. I'd go, play Redneck Mother again. It was really a funky place. But then I got sober, clean and sober, and that was still the only gig I could get. Hoping Pat Mola at Green Hall would hang up, and, because I was supposed to play there, and I didn't show up, and I was played at a Kerrville Folk Festival, a blackout, so I didn't go for 8 years. I didn't go, but I finally got through the program, made amends, and went down and asked Pat. I said, man, I'm sorry I didn't show up. What I was wrong. What can I do to make it right? And he said, well, let me book you and you show up. And same thing with Kerrville. And so, but it's one of those things, is one night it was really, really demoralizing. I had about 3-4 months sober, and I was going to these meetings, and by still playing Charlie's, and I couldn't get a gig anywhere else. I mean, I was 41 years old. It's done. That was it. I was going to see. I don't even know what I was going to do. But then one night, I just went home after a really funky night, and all of a sudden, I just went, I'm going to write songs. Not to try to get a publishing deal. I'm not going to write songs to try to get Clint Black or, George Strait to cut them. I'm going to write songs to see what I can contribute by doing this, rather than just seeing what I could get. And I'm going to write these songs not thinking about their future, and just see if I can, make somebody smile, make somebody groove, make somebody think. And so anyhow, at age 41 or 42, I kind of met this old guy, and I said, man, it's done. I'm 42 years old. I don't have a career. It's over. I think I can probably shag cars, And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a good songwriter. He said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to be a songwriter. And he said, what kind of songwriter? I said, a good songwriter. He goes, why not a prosperous songwriter? And it never occurred to me. And so he said, man, why don't you set this goal? Why don't you set a goal of being an award-winning, prosperous, respected songwriter? And I went, man, and he said, well, if you set low goals, you deny what you can be. And I went, so I went home, and I said, man, how do I become a award-winning, prosperous songwriter? And I said, well, I need to write songs. Well, I'm not that good of a guitar player. I don't know how to finger pick. Well, take guitar lessons. I don't want to take guitar lessons, but then I overcame that fear. I called up this guy, so he could teach me how to finger pick. and then that deal. Plus, my nails here, by the way, I kept breaking my nails. So this nail girl in San Marcos said, let me put this black cherry color on it. We'll stick it in the heater thing, pull it out, we'll do it again, stick it in there, do it again, then I'll put this horse hoof glaze on it. So that's why my nails are like this, and I haven't broken them. But anyhow, that's not because I'm a goth guy. I mean, I got Wile E. on my hat. How goth is that? But anyhow, so right in there, somewhere at age 42, I took guitar lessons and started writing. I knew I couldn't be Guy Clark or Townes Van Zandt, but I said, man, if I can write songs that their audience would like, And so the album Loco Gringo's Lament was the first album I made that I could hand to someone and look them in the eye and go, here it is. All my other albums, the Warners, Renegade, they all came with excuses duct taped to them. Like, well, we ran out of money. Well, we left and they put steel guitars and girl singers on every track. We mixed all 11 songs and they all had excuses, but Loco was the one. Here it is, and I can accept whether you like it or not, because inside I knew that this was a record I wanted to make, and so yeah, it all kind of shifted around, kept changing my thinking.